Hello, beautiful souls. My name is Jessie, and welcome back to another episode of Rewire to Inspire. The show where we'll dive into self-love, learn tangible ways to rewire the brain, and discovering your soul's purpose. The goal of Rewire to Inspire is to encourage listeners to begin doing the hard work, to get curious and open to maximizing your life. Our mindset shapes how we live. Depending on life events, traumas, and personal experiences, our mindsets are all vastly different. However, one thing we all have in common is the ability to rewire our mind, to change the narrative, and to pivot our lives. I hope you leave each episode with the belief that you are so worthy to live a life true to you. I look forward to chatting with you every single Tuesday and Thursday and helping you grow exponentially in all areas of your life. Without further ado, here's today's episode. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to my podcast, Rewire to Inspire. I'm your host, Jessie Brown, and I am super excited to be jumping on the microphone with you all for episode number 156. If you missed Tuesday's episode 155, I shared all about 5 benefits of speaking your truth. To be quite honest, that was probably one of my favorite episodes I've ever recorded. And upon reflecting on why that is, why I felt that way after, the reason being is because I stopped suppressing my truth, which is ironic in an episode about speaking your truth, and I really noticed and embodied how that felt for me. And as someone who is very good at keeping herself in this perfect little box so that nobody sees any flaws, nobody thinks anything is wrong, very, very good at having this facade of being okay all the time, during that episode, I gave myself full permission to just let go. To just be. I'm going to take my microphone off my stand here for a minute because I feel like I kind of want to just get into a comfortable stance again today. And I think that as I continue to lean into this feeling and cultivate trusting that if I share my truth and I speak from my heart and not from what I think other people want to hear, and I trust that, that is how I've been able to get into flow, and I do truly trust that that is how I'm going to be able to make an impact. And so I want to thank you all for just being on this journey with me over the last 2 years. It is ridiculously crazy to look back at how this podcast started and where we've come, and knowing that we're just getting started. And so I just want to say a quick thank you. I have so much gratitude on my heart this morning, and I just want to take a moment again to say thank you. I feel like I've been doing that a little extra on my podcast lately, but it's truly because I don't take a second of this for granted. As someone who could have never fathomed being able to speak in front of other people, and now knowing how deep of a passion it is for me and that I get the ability to do this twice a week, just fills my cup more than I could ever imagine. And so I want you to know as well that within that, to make this kind of a mirror for you, if you have not stumbled on that thing yet for you, it does exist. It does exist. And it's often on the other side of fear where it lies. And again, me saying that there's no way that I would have spoken in front of people 2 years ago, I could never fully articulate for you how true that is. I had such a deep fear that my voice did not matter. And once I just started to lean into doing this for me, and not with the expectations of what other people will think or caring about the perception of others, but instead doing it because it felt good for me and it felt right for me, magnificent things began to happen. Lean into that fear. That is where greatness happens. That is where your dreams will begin to come true. It is not going to be easy. It's not going to feel right all the time. It's going to be scary. And I guess within what I just said, it's not going to feel right. It will feel right. It will feel scary. There'll be all the reasons in the world, all the signs in the world of why you should stop, why you shouldn't do it, all the excuses. Trust it. Lean into it, because you do truly never know what's going to happen. And so within all that, you guys, I am on here with a grateful heart, very excited to dive into today's episode with you all. Before I do, I want you to just take a moment to check in with yourself. How are you feeling? How is your day? What emotion are you feeling? What are you maybe needing right now? As someone who preaches all these things, know that I also so deeply struggle with this. I quite literally have an emotions wheel beside me and a window of tolerance picture beside me to remind me to check in with myself. And yet somehow I still manage to forget, because we're very good at prioritizing all the things that are external to us. We leave ourselves last, which I think very nicely complements and ties into what I want to talk to you guys about today. And that is, are you giving too much or too little of yourself? And as I was sitting here reflecting on what I wanted to talk about, I've really been leaning into, what have I been learning? What have I been overcoming? What have I been growing through? And what can I share with you guys to help even one person? And this topic kept coming up over and over and over again. The reason that I think that this topic surfaced for me largely was because this last weekend I went to some concerts, some local concerts. And I noticed that when I'm around a lot of other people, my tendency is to shrink myself, to minimize myself. I begin to feel like I am less significant than everybody else around me. And I know that this comes from past pain, and I know that this comes from struggling with self-worth. And I'm so glad that I took the time to reflect on this, to tell myself how inaccurate and stupid that is. And I could catch myself in those moments while at the concert being like, Jessie, stop. Turn off this internal dialogue for just a second and maybe contemplate that that's not true. But I want you to ask yourself, what is your tendency? Is your tendency to overcorrect and feel like you need to put on this ego? You need to, puff yourself up. You need to make yourself big. You need to make yourself loud. Or are you someone who shrinks yourself? Because we all have a tendency, we all have a safe place we go to. This can sometimes shift depending who we're around, what we're doing. But we typically all have a tendency. And if you're watching video, you can see I'm showing a turtle tattooed on my wrist. And when I first got this tattoo, I told people it's just because I like turtles. True, very true. My favorite animal. But more so than that, it had so much deeper meaning for me. I got that tattoo because I have this clear memory in my head of when I first started diving into meditation. This was during the pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic. And I remember I was sitting on my couch and I was meditating, and I had a hoodie on. I had a big hood on it. And I remember during this meditation, this hood kept feeling like a shell that was protecting me. And again, I go into deep meditation. Sometimes it's weird. Sometimes we get really woo, but God, it was so magical. I remember it very clearly. And something came over me of feeling like this turtle that for the first time was coming out of her shell. And so that to me is a reminder that I have that safe space that I can go to, that protector. But I also know that I'm someone who overcorrects, and I dim myself and I dim my light for other people's benefits. Right? If everybody else around me feels good and feels empowered and is happy and is whatever, why would I matter? It doesn't matter about me. And I'm beginning to realize how sick of that narrative I am for myself. And I almost want you to get fired up and be frustrated at what your tendency is. Because here's the thing, is whichever one it is, it's not serving you, because you're not being your unique self. You're not actually being you. You're overcorrecting in some way. But the thing is this can only really begin to shift and improve when you're aware that you do it. Because I think so many of us aren't even aware that we do this, because again, it's that protector that comes on, it comes over us. And like almost everything in life, it is an over or under correction of experiences that we've been through. If you have always had to suppress yourself, your tendency might be to overcorrect that around other people by being super loud, super blunt, front of the room. But at the same time, if you were always suppressed, diminished, your tendency might be that is your safe place. That is all you know. And so it's really going to be unique to you. And knowing that we don't really choose what that is. A lot of this is subconscious. It's our brain's way of trying to protect us. But once you become aware of these things, it's really hard to not notice it happening. And that was me at the concert all weekend. I could notice myself shrinking myself. And I'm just like, for what? For what? Why are we so good at instantly going in our heads and saying, that person's prettier than me, that person's cooler than me, that person blah, 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 blah. And I'm talking at a freaking concert. I do this everywhere. I do this at work. I do this just out and about. I want you to know that comparison is a good thing because it can benchmark us against where we are, where we want to go. It can inspire us, but comparison can also destroy us. We are wired in that way to perceive people in certain ways because we need to identify for ourselves if they are a threat. And I don't mean a threat in today's day and age. This has been wired in our brains over the thousands of years of pre-existence for us. We're wired in the way to be very hyper-focused on everything around us to see if we are safe. And if we've been shown before emotionally, physically, psychologically, that certain things are not safe, you will begin to continue to identify those things as such. And so for me, and I'm sharing all these things from my perspective, insert here how this lands for you. Because again, I can only speak from my perspective, but I would bet that if you are a woman and you are listening to this, men do this too. Oh my God, men do this too. But women, and specifically, for some reason, God, we compare ourselves to each other. I literally turned to my sister-in-law during we were walking and I said, do you also feel like you're comparing yourself to everybody else here? I verbally asked that because I was like, this can't just be me, right? And the thing is it's never a negative thing in my head. I'm not like, oh my God, blah, blah, blah. My head's going, she's so freaking beautiful. Oh my God, she looks great. And instead of just owning that and also owning for myself how I look and how I feel, I say, okay, well, if she looks that good, then I must look like shit. And that's what we do. Whereas instead of just stopping it at, they look amazing, but that doesn't have to take away from me. That is the energetic space that I am trying to improve for myself to get to. And I am not perfect in this, not even close. I am very much in the beginning of this, and I want to be honest about that. As someone who's trying to lead by example in the mental health world, I want to be open and honest about these conversations that we all do this. And it's hurting us, and it crushes us, and it causes us to not be able to show up as the best versions of ourselves because we're in here. We're in our heads. When we get in our heads, we're not in our bodies and we're not present. And we can begin to catastrophize and not show up as ourselves. And so the topic of today's podcast episode, are you giving too much of yourself? Or too less of yourself? Because I know that that's the category that I fall in. I'm very good at diminishing my worth, my potential. The things that I know about me are true based on the person's, places, things that are around me. I wrote down a couple of things for today's episode. And I think that the biggest one that kept coming up for me when I was thinking about today's episode is self-acceptance. This really will not improve without self-acceptance, self-awareness, and self-acceptance. Because until you've improved your relationship with yourself, that negative bias is going to continue to play on repeat in the background. If the same dialogue and truth that you keep telling yourself keeps playing and you keep fueling it, it's not going to stop. And if you're also around people that do the same thing, that's when it also starts to become very toxic. Self-acceptance is one of the hardest things that we can begin to improve for ourselves. But it's also the most important. I have on my whiteboard over here, I spent the morning and I wrote my name in the middle of it. And around it, I wrote all the things that come up when I think of myself. Even things that felt icky to write down because I'm like, if anyone knew that I wrote those things down, would they call me arrogant? Would they say I'm cocky? But what if instead self-acceptance actually just gives us permission to know and embody the things about us that are true and that make us great. Because here's the thing. Let's say I wrote one of my friends' names down on there and I filled this whiteboard with all the things that I love about them. That wouldn't be an issue. We wouldn't think twice about that. But when we do it for ourselves, for some reason, the dialogue shifts. And that becomes a bad thing. I think it's hard to improve this in a world where we're kind of pressured in a way to be negative about ourselves. It's more accepted to talk negatively about ourselves than it is to talk positively. And so I think when we're constantly fueled and re-shown that that's how we're supposed to be, it's very hard to shift that. And that's really what I want this episode to be about and to land is it starts with you. And I know that this starts with me because if I start by looking within, giving myself that self-acceptance, noticing when I'm shrinking myself or overcorrecting, and I notice that that's happening and what that's trying to do, how that served me in the past, and I consciously work on trying to fix and heal that, think of the permission that that then gives to somebody else to do the same. The next time you hear somebody maybe say something kind about themselves, notice how that lands with you. Does that trigger something within you? When you see other people being really happy, unapologetically themselves, does that poke something in you? Does that make you insecure? We're very good at projecting things onto other people in which we have not healed within ourselves. And I know that every time that I get insecure, I'm definitely at a place now where I can say, yeah, that's my baggage. That's my stuff. I need to work on that. That's not fair for me to project onto other people. Because that's what we do is, and this is like your classic Mean Girls movie, right? When someone says something negative about somebody else, it's because something within them is envious or jealous. But we can fix that. But it starts with ourselves. And this is one of the hardest things that we can do. I've taken on one of the hardest missions I think that there is, which is to reframe how we view self-love and mental health and just personal growth and showing up for ourselves. Because in a world that, again, diminishes and punishes us for being great and for owning being great, it's one of the hardest things that we can do. Because it's inevitable that we're going to get backlash. It's inevitable that we're going to be made fun of. It's inevitable that somebody is going to be envious. But the question and the thing that you need to ask for yourself is, how is that tipping you? How is that affecting you? I want you to take a moment and just assess for yourself right now. How much time do you spend over or under correcting? Some signs of this that I'm kind of thinking of right now in the moment is feeling exhausted. Obviously, there's many reasons to feel exhausted, but if you do not feel fueled around other people, there's likely a part of you that is diminished, that is suppressing. If you feel like you are different around different people, you are probably over or under correcting. If you feel like you keep attracting the same type of people over and over again that continue to hurt you, continue to make you feel icky, continue to make you feel like you can't be your truest organic self, you are probably over or under correcting. And again, I don't want you to be hard on yourself for this. We're hard on ourselves enough. That's the problem. That is the problem. We are all way too hard on ourselves. And I want you to know that, yes, it's good to be hard on ourselves, but in the right way. And I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of having that inner dialogue go off all the time and crush my self-worth, crush my self-esteem, cause me to not show up in the best way possible because I'm just so hyper-fixated in my head of perception of others. I used to think that I was someone who didn't care what other people think. Oh my God, that's so not true. That's such a lie. And yes, there are things that I do not give an F about. I will wear whatever I want. I will be funny. I'll be silly. Those things don't bother me. But there are times that it does. And the thing is this also comes down to different triggers. Because sometimes when I'm in a really good headspace, I'm like, I don't care, the world can't touch me. But then when I'm having an off day or a low day, I feel like I could cry if somebody just looked at me wrong. We need to figure out what that kind of balance is for us. What is that homeostasis, safe space that we can come to? And the last thing that I want to share that I wrote down that I think kind of goes off of this is to hyper remind yourself. Hyper remind yourself of what you're doing in that moment. And if you feel like it's serving you or not serving you. Hyper remind yourself that you have a tendency to overcorrect or undercorrect. Hyper remind yourself to get out of your head for a second and get back into your body. Hyper remind yourself that you can shift how you're showing up at any time. At any time, you can shift how you're showing up as a person. Isn't that cool? Do we know that? Do we actually know that and embody that? No, I don't think that we do. The thing is we can really shift our whole world for ourselves at the snap of a finger. But until you believe that, know that, trust that, cultivate that, lean into that, embrace that, you will continue to ride the same wave that you've been riding. Has that ride been serving you? And if it hasn't, and if you don't feel like you've been your best self, and you don't feel like you've been showing up organically, let this be your sign to lean into why. There's definitely external factors that can leak into us not feeling like we can be ourselves, likely when things are not in alignment. But so much of this starts within, and then when we begin to do that inner work, we can then set clearer boundaries and wean out those people that aren't serving us to their full potential. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. This is definitely something that I can only speak on so far because I am consciously trying to work on this every single day. This is a topic that has not surfaced as much ever in my life as much as it has in the last 2 weeks. And noticing how I felt at that concert was such a mirror for me. Because I'm like, whoa, I have some work to do. And so I hope that this inspires even one of you to begin to tune within and do the work. So thank you guys so much as always. I look forward to chatting with you next week. Happiest of Septembers, and I'll chat with you soon. Bye, you guys. Thank you all so much for tuning into today's episode of Rewire to Inspire. I absolutely love connecting with you all, so make sure you're following me on Instagram. I am at JessieBrown13. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to leave a review or share with someone you think would enjoy. I look forward to chatting with you all next episode. And remember, get out of your head and into your heart.